Hello everyone and welcome back to my course, Microsoft Security Operations Analyst SC200. In this lesson we are going to talk about a capability in Microsoft Sentinel called Entity Behavioral Analytics. As Microsoft Sentinel collects logs and alerts from all of its connected data sources, it builds baseline behavioral profiles of your organization's entities, including users, hosts, IP addresses, and domains. Now, identifying threats, let's say, inside an organization and their potential impact, whether a compromised entity or malicious insider, has always been time-consuming and labor-intensive process, let's say. Sifting through alerts, connecting the dots, and active hunting all add up to a massive amounts of time and effort expanded with minimal returns and the possibility of sophisticated threats evading this type of discovery. Now, elusive threats like zero-day attacks, targeted attacks, and advanced persistent threats can be the most dangerous to an organization, making their detection, let's say, all the more critical. Now, the user entity behavioral analytics in Microsoft Sentinel, or shortly called UEBA, UEBA, right? Basically eliminates the drudgery from your analysis workloads and the uncertainty, let's say, from the efforts involved, and delivers kind of a high fidelity actionable intel. As Microsoft Sentinel collects data from its sources, as I've mentioned, it builds these baselines of behavioral profiles, right? And it builds them across time and across peer group horizon. So using various techniques and machine learning capabilities, Sentinel can then identify anomalous activity and help you determine if an asset has been compromised. Not only that, but it can also figure out the relative sensitivity of particular assets, identify peer groups of assets, or evaluate the potential impact of any given compromised asset. Now, armed with this information, you can imagine that you can effectively prioritize the investigation and incident handling, right? So in this slide over here, you have an overview of the Microsoft Sentinel workflow, how the data gets in, and the user entity behavioral analytics engine that basically sniffs through the data, analyzes it, creates baselines, and then alerts on any kind of anomalies that it discovers. Here we have the security-driven analytics, and here, inspired by the Gartner's paradigm for user entity behavioral solutions, Microsoft Sentinel provides an, let's say, outside-in approach based on 3 frames of reference. The first one is use cases. So by prioritizing relevant attack vectors and scenarios based on security research aligned with the MITRE attack framework, of tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques. Basically, Microsoft Sentinel focuses specifically on the most valuable logs each data sources provides. While the first and foremost supporting Azure data sources, Microsoft Sentinel also selects third-party data sources to provide data that matches the threat scenarios in user entity behavioral analytics. And then lastly, we have the analytics piece, because in Sentinel they're using various machine learning algorithms that basically identifies anomalous activities and presents evidence clearly and concisely in the form of contextual enrichments. And some examples are here in the slide. Here we go. It triggers anomalies based on mapping to MITRE ATT&CK, user and entities baselines, contextual and behavioral analytics. It filters also the data based on the security research across the industry, and basically this is the raw data ingestion. And as you can see, from the raw data ingestion of 100%, it basically going through all of these filters over here. It basically decreases the false positives, and basically it returns a number of raw anomaly events of less than 1%. Okay, Microsoft Sentinel also presents artifacts that can help a security analyst get a clear understanding of anomalous activities in context, and of course in comparison with the user's baseline profile. Actions performed by a user, or a host, or an IP address are evaluated contextually, where a true outcome indicates an identified anomaly. And this can be across geographical locations, devices or environments, across time and frequency horizons compared to a user's own history, for example, or compared to peers' behavior, or compared to an organization's behavior overall. Each entity is scored with an investigation priority score, which basically determines the probability of a specific user performing a specific activity based on behavioral learning of the user and their peers. Now, let's take a quick look at exploring the user entity behavior information. So the entity behavioral page allows you to search for entities or select them from a list already displayed entities. Once selected, the entity page is displayed with information and timeline of alerts and activities. Now, again, the incident investigation graph also includes an option for insights, and insights display information from the entity behavior data. So as you can see here from the slide, the entity pages are designed to be part of multiple usage scenarios. So they can entity pages can be accessed from the incident page. It can be accessed from within the investigation graph, from bookmarks, and from the entity behavioral analytics blade from Microsoft Sentinel, where you can actually search for entities. And all of these sources lead to the same actual page, and that is the entity page. Now, when you display the entity timeline, basically you are presented, and let me change the slide over here very quickly. But we'll also get into the portal, and I'll show you there as well. So when you encounter an entity, you select an entity, you are basically in a search or an alert or an investigation, you can select the entity and you will be taken to an entity page where you'll find a data sheet full of useful information about that particular entity. Now, the types of information you'll find include basic facts about the entity itself, a timeline of notable events related to this entity, and insights about the entity's behavior. As you can see here on the page, you even have a graph of the entity's activities, a timeline of alerts, and here on the right side, we will see in the portal immediately, you will have basically behavioral insights of this entity that you are looking for. Now let's get in the portal and let me show you exactly how it looks live. So over here in Microsoft Sentinel, if we go to the entity behavioral blade over here, as you can see here, you can search for entities or you can directly select entities from the list. Now, again, you can use accounts, hosts, or IPs. So let's select this account, for example, the one I'm using, and as you can see, you are immediately presented with information. Let's say here on the left hand side with the security identifiers and all of the stuff from within Azure AD. Then in the middle you have a graph of the entity alerts and events over time. You also have a timeline of the alerts over here. And here you have insights, but again, we kind of don't have any insights in our tenant yet because we don't have data available to work with. But for you, when you will actually start doing the hands-on labs from section 1 to this section, you've already should have data flowing into the tenant in your trial tenant, and you should have more and more data available in your tenant to play with and to display, of course. But again, here's how the entity page looks like. If I go back and we select the IP address as well, again, we will have a timeline of events, of alerts, and here we go. We have more information here about this IP address. As you can see, the organization of the IP address, the internet service provider, the location, this is my current city, Romania, country, Europe, first seen, last seen, and other informations over here. Here you have the alerts that this IP address is related to, and here again we have no results, but you would have other detailed information and insights in regards to this IP address entity. Now, this brings our discussion to an end. I will see everyone in the next lesson where we'll talk about querying, visualizing, and monitoring data in Sentinel, and specifically we are going to talk about workbooks. Until then, I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you for viewing. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my course, Microsoft Security Operations Analyst SC200. Now in this last lesson of this section, we are going to discuss using workbooks in Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel workbooks basically provide interactive reports or dashboards, however you want to call them, that help you visualize important signals by combining text, table, charts, and tiles. Now, again, Sentinel provides many templates of workbooks that are already ready for use, but you can use these templates to create your own workbooks and then modify them as needed for your specific requirements in your organization. Most of the data connectors that Microsoft Sentinel uses to ingest data come with their own workbooks. You can get better insight into the data that is being ingested by using tables and visualizations, including bar and pie charts. You can also make your own workbooks, as I mentioned, from scratch instead of using the predefined templates, but again, it's better to use a template and then adjust it or modify it as per your requirements. Now, the workbooks page contains the templates of the workbooks and the workbooks themselves. Let me get into the portal and let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here on Microsoft Sentinel, if we go to the workbooks page over here, as you can see that you have, at the time of the recording of this course, 116 available templates, right? And as soon as you will save a workbook, it will go into your My Workbooks tab over here. Now, these templates, again, have to do with any type of data connector that you already have connected, like, for example, let's say Microsoft 365 Defender, let's say. Okay, Microsoft 365 security posture, right? But as you can see, we have only this data flowing in instead of all of these over here that that have as this workbook configured as data sources. But let's take an easier workbook, for example, and let's take a look at the Azure AD sign-ins. And here it is. The Azure AD sign-in logs workbook. What this does is basically presents you in a nice way of visualizing your sign-in activity across your Azure AD tenant. Because we already connected the Azure AD sign-in logs to our Microsoft Sentinel workspace. As you can see here, the required data type is sign-in logs from the Azure AD Microsoft Sentinel connector. So let's click on View Template, and here again you will be presented with an overview of sign-in trends over time, all sign-ins, successful sign-ins, pending user actions, and more information. If we scroll down, we can see that we can even see the detailed sign-ins, the operating system from which the user signed in, and this would be available for all your users in your tenant. Now, before we can go and actually edit this workbook, again, here we have filters like from the last 14 days, 30 days, you can use a custom time period. You can choose what apps you're interested in to see the sign-ins for. You can choose specific name prefixes. You can choose a username that you're interested in or any type of category. Okay, again, before you can actually edit this template or make adjustments to it, right? You need to save the template. For that, I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to still select this template, choose it, the Azure AD sign-in logs, and we click on Save. Now we need to specify a location where we want this workbook to be saved. I'm going to choose the same location as the Sentinel workspace, and I'm going to click on OK. Now, once this workbook is saved, you will see that we have a button to see View Saved Workbook. And again, if I go over here, you will see the workbook, my saved workbook over here. Now, if we click on Save Workbook, we will see that we have additional options here on the top, right? And I will get back to the slides in a moment, and I will show you, because I've put all these actions in a table and exactly what each do. But if you click on Edit Workbook, you will see that for each element in the workbook, like for the header, like for this graph over here, below it, for this dashboard, let's say over here, right? You will have available an Edit button. And once we click on it, this will open the actual query that's behind this visual representation, because all of these workbooks basically have in the backend behind them have a log analytics query. Again, you can change the appearance of the dashboard, of the chart. You can choose what tiles you want. You can choose what size you want the tiles to be displayed, or you can customize the Custo query over here, and you will basically change the workbook itself. Now, once you are done editing, and don't worry, you will have documentation. I'm not going to go into too much details in regarding this, because I'll leave you links with documentation in regards to workbooks and how to change them and how to customize them in the downloadable resources for this particular lesson. And you will also have a task in the hands-on lab at the end of the section to actually create a workbook from scratch and amend the workbook from a template. So once you're done editing, you click on Done Editing or on Cancel if you don't want to, of course, save the changes. You can even remove this tile from the workbook itself, this one with the sign-ins. You can remove it by clicking the Remove button over here. Let's say I'm done editing, and then, of course, you would want to save your workbook, because you might want to save your changes that you've done to this particular workbook. Now, creating a workbook from scratch, basically, again, let me go back here, and you would just click on Add Workbook over here, and then you would start building your workbook depending on the Custo queries that you want to use or on the data that you want to visualize in your workbook. But from my point of view, it's more easy to take a template and then modify it as per your requirements. Because again, if I go to the templates over here and remove this search filter, you see that there are 116 templates available basically for any kind of connector within the environment, and much more workbooks to see here and to go through. So again, please go through the workbooks, see what they all do, see what insights they provide, because you have plenty of templates to choose from. And again, in the hands-on lab, you'll have the opportunity to modify workbooks, to work with workbooks on your own. Now, this brings our discussion about workbooks to an end, not before going back to the slides and actually showing you the table that I wanted to show you. And let me just go back to the slides very quickly over here and go to my last slide from the deck. And here is a table that summarizes every action that you can do on a workbook from that top tile bar of actions after, of course, very important, after you save your workbook. So you cannot edit a template, but you can edit a workbook of your own. So once you save a template as your own workbook, you will have all of these options available on the right top hand side of the workbook. Take a moment, go through the table, see what each action does. This again concludes our discussion for this particular lesson, and this also brings our section to an end. Please go through the lab for this section, complete the hands-on lab. Of course, complete the review questions available for this section as well, because they are meant to, let's say, test your knowledge on the topics that we've discussed throughout the section. And I will see everyone in the next section and the last section of the course, in which we are going to talk about threat hunting capabilities in Microsoft Sentinel. Until then, I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you for viewing.